Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gibson Show, where I'm joined by the Invisible Man, Fox. Fox, how you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. Did you have a nice holiday period? Did you do anything nice worth talking about?
Uh, just flew home, spent time with the family, the default.
hmm Pretty much, like for most people, it is kind of the only time you get to spend with family or even old friends from school anymore, because everybody is off around the world doing their own thing. You obviously live in a completely different time zone from your family for most of the year. So I suppose we'll get stuck right into it and we'll talk a little bit about you and your career so far. So all in all, I think you could probably say it's been a good career, but there's definitely maybe a couple of things that you'd love to do over the next coming years. What would you say have been the highlights for you so far?
I would definitely say, like, probably like the highlight. I think for anyone like playing under a org like for me at org like Cloud9, that was
hmm
probably like a big highlight of my career, especially like so early in it. I would say, uh, you know, growing up just watching C9, play CS and stuff
hmm
like that is kind of like a childhood dream. So I'm happy I got that experience. I would say the real main big part of our big point that's I guess most notable to me is getting I think it was like top three at Invite
hmm
in 2019 with Reciprocity.
hmm
That was like we've won. I've won what's it called, a minor event, DreamHack Montreal.
hmm
But like to me, I feel like playing at Invite and getting top three against like behind Prime G2 and Prime Empire, I think that's like more of an achievement for me than like winning DreamHack, even though like we should have probably never won DreamHack in the first place.
hmm Well, to me, you say something like that, we maybe you shouldn't have won DreamHack, but the way Siege is played, the team that deserves to win the tournament usually does. You know, you gotta. It's not best of ones; it's best of threes, best of fives. So the best team will always win over the course of those. But you spoke a little bit about SI, and obviously you played back the last time SI had a crowd. You know, you played back in 2019 as well. What is it actually like playing in front of that massive arena of fans? Because obviously we've not quite had that full arena yet since things have opened up since COVID.
Um, Honestly, I'd want to tell everyone that like, oh wow, it's crazy and
hmm
it's surreal and everything, but when you're actually playing, I don't know, at least for me, I don't even notice anybody like around me or in front of me.
hmm
But I would definitely say after the fact, like after you win or after you lose, that's when like you notice the crowd the
hmm
most, and it's like either the most um enjoyable experience, if you
hmm
won, and then if not, then it's like, ah, damn, like you kind of let like this whole room of people down, even if they're not there cheering for you. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we saw that a little bit in Charlotte. I think with when some of the NA teams were playing themselves, you could tell that some of the players absolutely loved it. Even in the most recent major, you saw a couple of moments involving Sonics, good and bad, whenever they managed to win or lose a game. But honestly, I think things are getting back the right way. You know, we're looking good for the next SI coming up. I think the crowd looks like it's going to be pretty good again. People are looking good, looking to get back in the venue, and thankfully for you guys, you've had a good year, a good enough year that you don't need to worry about going through close calls. You're already there, ticket kind of stamped. So I want to talk a bit about your teammates. Obviously, you and Vertical, you've been part of this team now for a long time. You've seen a lot of change. Some of your teammates, ex teammates, have gone on to coaching roles. Some of them moved on to other teams. What is it about Vertical that you kind of really like working with him, and why do you think OXG puts so much value on the two of you guys?
Um, well, at least for me, like personally working with Vertical, it's just like from the start of me teaming with him, he was always known as like, just that player that can just change the course of a game, just it completely explode and just carry everybody. We saw him on Rogue,
hmm
and then coming to our team, it was kind of like that. And I feel like now, throughout time transitioning, it's a transition that I kind of had to make when we needed a support player back in the day, and I think like Vert's now transitioning into a
hmm
more of a flex role, and it's just something that you have to do when there's younger players that are coming to the scene, and you know it's harder, in my opinion, for a younger player to like flex to to be smarter and think about all the possible outcomes
hmm
of a round, whereas an experienced player has that experience. So, but not every experienced player can do that. There are a lot that are stuck in their ways. So, um, I'd say just especially like from then to now, Vert's always been talented, and now he's just very flexible. He's like, probably the one or one of the people that always like does what I say immediately when I say it. So it's very easy to team with him.
Hmm.
Um, and why OXG put so much backing behind him and I mean, uh, I don't know. I'd hope just because they can see the vision that I can kind of give to them and bring to
Hmm.
them, and they just trust me behind it. OXG's very about the people who are kind of like rising with them from the start.
Hmm.
When they first started out, like I think it was like 2-3 years ago, they were brand new. And now they have like almost a big team in almost every esport and stuff, and they're growing every day. I wouldn't be surprised if they're not like a tier one org
Yeah.
in the next couple of years, next year, if not.
Well, success can always have a big fact to do with that as well. You never know how, it could be for you guys if you were to go on and win SI. And I think something that probably plays into your favor as well is, although there were some roster changes last year, going into SI, you're not one of the teams that are looking to fill a spot last minute. There's a lot of rumors going around about teams looking to find that last piece of the puzzle. You obviously brought in Sweater, I think, back in August, if I'm not wrong. So how good is it for you guys to have a bit of time to prep going into, to prep properly as a team going into SI?
I mean, I think it's important. Also, I would say it could be a double-edged sword. I
Mm-hmm.
find sometimes when you just make a fresh roster change, things are just always perfect. Off the start, you win everything, you win every game because everything's so fresh and there's nothing that you don't want to try.
Mm-hmm.
But then every team gets into that kind of like middle period where everything kind of starts to get lackluster and stale, and then a lot of teams kind of get into that rut, and the good teams in that rut are able to mix stuff up, switch stuff up, and then come out better on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So I think fortunately for us, we've gone through that rut. Obviously starting off 0-5 with the last stage. Now I'm pretty sure we're undefeated
Mm-hmm.
since that 0-5 loss, so hopefully going into invite we can keep that win streak going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's great practice. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, so you spoke a bit about your start to that last stage of NAL and how you've been since. What do you think NAL has been so topsy turvy this year? Obviously you had TSM winning the last invitational. Then they kind of had that hangover that lasted a couple of stages. They never got going. Then you had Dark Zero and Astralis making a major final. Then they had their hiccups after that point. To me, NAL is the one league that doesn't seem to have that one or two teams that are above the rest. Why do you think that is in NAL? Do you think it's because as a whole the league is maybe, more competitive from top to bottom? Or do you think that maybe there is a case of some teams, experiencing some success at a major and then relaxing a little bit for the next stage? Like, why do you think it is?
I think a big thing, honestly, comes from the teams in North America. I think there's a lot of teams that are just only good against North American teams
Mm-hmm.
because they're so heavily reliant on counter strats and heavily reliant on knowing what the other team does because you scrim them all the time. And like, to throw a little shade, there are some top teams that literally you see they're just so dominant in NA, and then they go to events and just tank
Mm-hmm.
consistently, and it's because they're only good against North American teams. So I feel like being a good LAN team, it's just a different type of skill set to have. And that's why I think NA is a lot more different. It's really not like the other regions where it's always the same dominant teams beating everybody going to the
Mm-hmm.
event. It's just there's teams that aren't even focused on the events. They're just focused on counter-stratting, bot review, and preparing for the team at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but obviously I think that's like a big light. And then also in NA, I really don't think there's a level of ego that every team has. Nobody's trying to help anybody out. Nobody's trying
Mm-hmm.
to build good working relationships. Everyone's making fun of each other. Everyone's roasting each other. And then when you play against each other, you can sense almost a sense. You can almost sense a level of entitlement
Mm-hmm.
to some of these teams. Even these teams that are absolute horseshit, like that are consistently at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
They still, oh, you got to do our maps. Give us the side that we want. They spawn peak or do these runouts that they would never do in a game, and it's just like not good for practice levels. And yeah, just like what I just said, this sense of entitlement. I feel entitled enough to tell like players that they don't do the same things that they do in matches. And even though that we have the same type of, VODs to go back on and look at, it's still not something that I should be saying. So,
Yeah.
but when it comes to practice, we don't try to look at it that way. We try to treat everything like, maybe, I don't know, Mohesi on Mirage isn't going to jump out in scrims he does, but then
Hmm.
on a team like FaZe, those guys are going to jump out on the same map probably. So you try to look at it. We try to look at it that way.
And do you think that that's, like I said, kind of the ego thing where they think that they can assert dominance on other NA teams? Or do you think it's just a case where they genuinely feel that by doing that against NA teams that they can get the upper hand? Or like you said, do you think it is kind of torpedoing the region? Because there was a spell where NA was the most dominant region in Siege. It went APAC, it went NA. Now EU's having its moments. Like, realistically, player for player, NA is one of the top regions in the world for a reason. It just feels that as a fan, there's always this case of being let down a little bit by NA teams when you get to the tournaments because we want to see these players do well.
To be fair, I do think a lot of the tournaments teams, like NA teams, like always get shafted.
Mm-hmm.
Like this may sound like, for example, I forget, during COVID, the Sweden event, OXG was like one of the top teams like going into it. Unfortunately, I got COVID,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was like we couldn't compete. So it's like not to say that the other teams at the time weren't great, but like for example, like I think like Sonics at the time it was their first event. Another team, I don't know if it was SSG, I don't remember too far back, but I feel like it's every event there's always one team getting like shafted out of NA. And so
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte was really the only time where there was 4 teams that actually like, were all there, all competing, all at their top level. Um, I'm trying to think back to like the last event that I played at, obviously that's when stuff with the roster
Mm-hmm.
changes were going on. And a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but I heard a couple times that people had us pegged as the best NA team
Mm-hmm.
going into it right then, right? We were, I don't know if we got first or second in the NAL, everything was great, but we were going through the roster changes, right? At Lax and going to Sweater and stuff like that. It caused turmoil and we didn't even have a chance because we were just not even like in it in the game. So
Yeah.
I think just NA gets set back a lot before these events, but I do agree. I think a lot comes from the practice, and I feel like in other regions, EU, LATAM, their tier 2 scene is so hungry to like get better and
Mm-hmm.
to improve, and they look up to these older players. Where in our scene, there's a lot of tier 2 players that haven't accomplished anything, that refuse, to believe in any of the top players, and then even with some of the other teams, it's very difficult to get good practice if these people are just running out, jumping out, and doing things that they would just it would be unrealistic for them to do in a match.
Yeah. So one of the things you spoke about was, when you got COVID and you couldn't play at the Sweden major last year, not the most recent one. Do you think that there's any benefits of running 6-man rosters? I know that there's been a little bit of talk about maybe some tier 2 teams doing it. Other esports, they'll carry that player who's a sub, not a coach, not a member of staff, a dedicated sub who can step in if needs be. Is that something that you'd like to see, in your position, teams start to do a little bit more of? Or do you think that could be a distraction from the main core roster?
No, I think it's a waste of time because if you're not practicing with the same type of
Mm-hmm.
people every day the same way, it really is a waste of time in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. It messes up cohesion. I know like back in the day there was one team, I don't know if it was Millennium or they had 6-man roster because they had one guy who was just so good at a specific map that they
Yeah.
just would throw that guy in just for that one map.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to me it's like it causes a level of distrust.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say like you're the 5th guy and they're like, oh, well, on this map, this guy's better. So we're going to like shift you out. It's like, then like, why would that guy want to like try and put his hardest in for the other 8 maps,
Yeah.
Or why everyone's always playing. I think it's good for people to be playing for their positions and value that their positions, this stuff, our career, it's so volatile. Like you can't do it every day for the rest of your life. You have to make yourself a valuable person, a
Mm-hmm.
valuable player in the game.
I think.
So I think everyone playing for that is good, but really just holding someone up in front of your face saying like, oh, if you play bad, like this guy might take your spot forever. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know. It's just, I think it's a negative way to build a team.
Yeah, I think it is a fear, I think, for most esports player is the fact that the career isn't necessarily that long. Like, unless you're doing everything right from when you come into the scene until, you're a little bit older, like what the likes of Canadian done, he's extended his career a long time, crying in the EU as well. There is that constant pressure that, hey, one bad split, one bad stage, and you might never make it back to tier one. And I think that could add a little bit to the confusion as well. So we'll move on. We'll talk about something a little bit more fun. OXG has played an SCS recently, which I know was a passion project for Fermi and a lot of the casters that were involved. To me, I think it was a really good thing. It's been a long time since there's been that tier 3 or at least something outside of, your CL and NAL for teams to play in. What was it like to play in SCS? And obviously for you guys, you were one of the marquee teams, the likes of you and Astralis coming in. It really gave that league a little bit of lifeblood as well.
I mean, it was a lot of fun to participate in. Just we always scrim against some of those teams that we played against, and in our minds were always like, man, I wonder what it would like to play them in a match, because they're so confident, they have so much attitude in scrims, but we watch them in CL or in other things, and we're like, man, like these guys really don't play the exact same way. So it was nice to actually get to play them in real like scenarios to really test their limits. I think the whole SCS, all of it is just it's a great tournament, like you said, for tier 3. We were doing it mainly for practice for SI. Practice is one thing, but when you actually have something to compete on the line, pride and prize pool, it really makes players play differently. So we're happy with the outcome, obviously, with winning. We really thought that one of these teams would upset us or something, but we just went into it level head, tried as hard as we could every single game. I know can't say that too much, can't say the same about some of the other pro league teams that played. They just kind of winged it. But we wanted to show, like, put our best foot forward, right? It's about respect when it comes to those leagues.
It works both ways, because if you guys go in and play the best you can, it means that the team, players that are at the tier 3 or tier 2 level as well, they're giving themselves an actual standard and a competitive mindset to play against. Some players' stock went up during SCS, some players' stock went down, but I think overall, it's a good tournament for the scene, and I really want to see what they do for the next season, because, as I said, every player would rather play more competitive games than be scrumming every day of the week with nothing to look forward to in the downtime. So we'll talk about the close quals now then. So you had the chance in SCS to play against some of the teams that are taking part in the quals. You've got Reality TV, who dominated the last couple of stages of Challenger League and NA. You've obviously got TSM and SSG, two former Invitational champions in there. And then Mirage, who I think caught a lot of teams by surprise in the last stage of NAL. They made it to the major, having been not very good for most of the year. What are your thoughts about those 4 teams going into this? And do you think we'll see a miracle run from Reality TV, or do you think one of the tried and tested teams of SSG and TSM could get the job done?
I really wonder if there's like they haven't set up like the brackets, right, of who plays who.
I think they have, I think, let me double check Wikipedia here.
I can imagine that TSM and SSG play each other first round. So it would be a lot easier to figure out like who would play who. Personally, I think anybody who goes up against Mirage is beating Mirage. So I would imagine, in my opinion, I think it really comes. I think it comes down, every tournament, every situation like this, it comes down to TSM. Does TSM really want it that bad? Which it seems like they do. So I would definitely put my money on TSM to like come out of the groups first. But with that being said, I think there is kind of like an underdog factor when it comes to Reality TV, and I feel like when it comes to passion, I know that team is very passionate about like wanting to compete in this, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make it far, or even try to upset and win the whole thing. We've seen it before with when Parabellum wasn't in Pro League. I don't know if they were called Parabellum at the time, but they got that spot back in the Paris invite, I think.
Yeah.
So my cat is going crazy behind me.
It's fine. So SSG are playing Reality TV and TSM are playing Mirage in the semi-finals. So I think It's no surprise to see TSM and SSG at opposite sides of the bracket, so that they'll play each other in the upper bracket final. But
Mm.
TSM, they've obviously made some big roster changes this year. Obviously Geo moving to Sonics is a big one because he was a massive part of their SI win. What do you think of that TSM roster composition the way it stands now? Do you think they're built for international success, or do you think it could be a case where they've kind of shown through the first two stages this year where all the ingredients aren't really in place yet?
Um, although I think TSM is still working through the starting process of picking up two rookies, I definitely think as a team they have the right structure and
Mm-hmm.
fundamentals to already like kind of like blow through this qualifier. I don't think, in my opinion, the only reason why they're in the qualifier and they're not already qualified is because of their rough start during stage one
Mm-hmm.
throughout the year. But I think we've seen like as of recently, they've been back to full form that TSM is like known for.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, I think right now, I think this is like for them, this is like the SES how it was for us.
Yeah.
Where a lot of good practice and regardless of the outcome, they're not necessarily too worried about losing because they think that they're already going to win. And that's what I would imagine that there are as well, that they're probably going to win. Especially if they're playing Mirage first, I think they're easily beating Mirage. And then I would really love to see the SSG RTV game.
Mm-hmm.
I want to root for RTV because they're the underdog. But again, the same thing goes for SSG. They're,
Yeah.
they've had that time to work through the slumps and everything, and they're playing like they are, but I just don't know if they have enough juice to beat TSM. Enough adaptability, maybe.
Well, I'm excited because it is only a couple of weeks away, and I think by the end of this month, we should know who all the teams and all the players, because that's a big thing as well. There's a lot of spots still not filled who'll be competing at SI. I'm looking at all the teams that have qualified already, and obviously you guys, based on your performance all year, you're in there already. Astralis are there too, but I think they've had a lot of maybe struggles since they're based on their performance levels since the Charlotte Major. Who are the teams that you would worry about at SI without saying the easy one, saying BDS or the teams that have won major events? Who do you see as teams to really keep an eye on going into SI?
Oh, I'm never worried about BDS. Even though they won the last major, I'm just I've been on this hill for so long as as sleeping on BDS. They played great the last major, but I'm never worried about them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say just naturally the teams that I feel like always have our money are the Brazilian teams. I feel like you always got to watch out for FaZe.
Mm-hmm.
And then MIBR's always had our number. I don't know if MIBR is still like a similar roster since they've beat us that string of times. I remember they had
Mm-hmm.
Bodega during that time, so I don't even know if they have the same type of players. But yeah, all the Brazilian teams are definitely ones to keep an eye on. And then for us, I guess I would say maybe some of the NA teams. Like I said, I feel like we're a very great international competing team. But when it comes to NA teams, NA teams just have our numbers. They like to know what our play styles are. They really get down to a T on what we do and where they can feel confident and capitalize off of us. So
yeah, I'm excited. Like I am. It's like I said. It's I think NA, APAC, or NA, EU, or LATAM. It could be any of those regions that go ahead and win. I'll be curious to see how Liquid play. The heartbreak that they had. I know a lot of people who were neutral going into that final wanted to see Nesk and Palu win, but didn't quite get it over the line. So we'll close up our talk about SI and we'll move on to something that never really happened, but it was spoken about. There was this talk of a Siege World Cup a little while ago, about getting all the countries to put their best five forward. You're obviously Canadian yourself, and there's a couple of pretty good players from Canada. If you were to build your Canadian five, now you have to put yourself on the team, that's a given. Who would you choose as kind of the four players that you'd love to represent the region with you?
I think it goes without saying. I remember when this stuff came out, and it was like the Canadian team was like probably the easiest to make because there wasn't that many professional Canadian players. I think it goes without saying. I'd probably pick like myself and Troy first. Troy Canadian. As for the rest, I think Melted's Canadian. not sure. So I think like out of the list of Canadians, I think Melted, Spirits. Um, I don't know if like Eclipse is in Canadian, is he? I don't think so. I was trying to figure this out because I think that was always we would get it would be like Troy, me, Melted, Spirits, and then it was always the fifth that it was like
Hmm.
hard to like I guess like pinpoint. Um, oh, isn't Ferda Canadian on Beast Coast?
I think so. Actually, let me double check. I
Yeah,
think you might be right on that one.
it's either Ferda. Yeah, I think it's Ferda. So I guess Ferda.
Yeah, I think it'd be a cool one to see because obviously you and Canadian would be a fun one to watch together because you both take kind of similar roles when it comes to the shot taking. I'm sure you would say mechanically you're probably a bit better now because Canadian's a little bit further on in his career. And that's something I want to talk to you about you now. Obviously, you're still really young in esports terms, but your gameplay style has changed a little bit over time. You've gotten a lot better at some things. Looking back on your career, are you happy with how you've developed as a player? And are there things that maybe you've in your mind that you want to continue improving next year?
I'd say looking at my career, I think as a player and just like the way my life in gaming has evolved, I would say that I'm satisfied with how
Hmm.
it is. I think it's gone the exact way that I would have wanted it to go. Like I used to play entry, used to play very aggressive, but when it came to the role, I feel like sometimes my critical thinking would always just get in the way. So in a way, getting this chance or the chance a long time ago to kind of develop IGLing and develop playing more of like a flex position was more of a favor to me because it extends the longevity of my game.
Hmm.
Like you said, all it takes is one bad game and you're out of Pro League for the rest of your life. So, I kind of had that scare towards the start of towards the start of Siege.
Hmm.
I went and with excellence, and our team's entry. We got number one in NA. We played against G2 and got smoked. We only won like 2 rounds. And I dropped like a donut one of the maps, and that was one of those moments where it's like, wow, like everything's gone. You get dropped from your team,
Hmm.
everything's gone. And then fortunately, I was able to work my way back up, doing the same thing, but definitely getting this experience to not only IGL kind of increases my stock because it's very hard to find good IGLs,
Hmm.
especially since my system, I would like to say that it's proven to work. We've been getting top place. I would say we're probably the most consistent team in North America. When you look at consistency, like, oh, who's winning all the time, maybe you wouldn't pick us, but if you look at our lifespan since
Hmm.
this team's been, been on OXG, been on rec, we're always making top four. Maybe
Hmm.
we're not always getting first, not always second, but we're always top four. So we're consistently always good.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, for me, what I want to just hone in on this next year is just the consistency. And I've always been about consistency. It's so hard to be consistent, especially in a game like Siege.
No, that's a pretty good point. So there's two more points I want to touch on before we wrap up, and they're both going to be pretty quick. So first one is if anything ever happened that you had to, you had to leave OXG or, not be part of that team anymore, would you be one of the players who'd be interested in trying a new region? We've seen it in the past. A couple of guys have moved to EU. Would you be ever interested in playing in EU or LATAM or APAC?
Um, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how like Cristiano Ronaldo put it. It comes down to that money.
Yeah.
If you're getting paid to go somewhere crazy, I mean, of course, any org or team company knows that if you're relocating a player, you have to be able to give
Hmm.
them a little extra something to make that jump. Would I be opposed to it? No, I would never be opposed to it. Towards the start of my career, I had one or two options to go actually live and play for a team in Australia,
Hmm.
in APAC, and I definitely considered it at the time, but it was just not the right time. Obviously, my team was doing pretty well in North America, um, but if things ever came down to it, and I was no longer on OXG, and there was ever an offer for a different region, I mean, I'm always open to opportunities, not even just with Siege. I feel like there's definitely a lot of opportunities in coaching
Hmm.
or potentially in casting. I actually really
I've
enjoy
seen.
casting and analysting. So
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe I'd give that a try again if they'd let me.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I think with you, with the following you have in social media, with the way you present yourself, you've definitely got that broadcasting opportunity, I think, open to you whenever you decide your playing days are done. But I think it's a bit early yet to be talking about the end of your playing days, because I still think there's a lot to come from you. So we'll wrap it up with one last question. Obviously, like I said, you've got a massive following. You know, a lot of people love you. A lot of people love the OXG org. Going into SI, is there anything you want to say to those fans out there?
Just thank you guys for the support. You know, we've obviously had a little bit of a rocky start to our this new roster, but I feel like a lot of people are confident in saying that we've cleaned it up, we've wrapped it up, and we're on a very steady ship, and it's just going to come down to invite. You know, hopefully we don't disappoint.
Well, look, thank you, FoxA. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I always love talking to players in particular and hearing about your career so far. So best of luck in SI. And if you haven't already, guys, make sure to give FoxA a follow on all of his socials. That's if you haven't already, and give OXG a follow too. But from me, from FoxA, thank you guys and take care.